What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative. Hey, everybody. Real quick before we get started, just a quick note on this episode. You might be able to hear it from my voice, but I've been struggling with a cold the last few days. My voice has been coming in and out. It's been cracking. It's just been super rough. Wicked sore throat, like sandpaper rough, you know what I mean? But anyways, if I sound a little off in this episode, that's why. Thank you for listening. Super appreciate it. Let's get into the show. What's the goal of a collegiate esports program? How do you sell the idea of a collegiate esports program to your university? The school is on board. They said yes. You've got the funding. Now what? How do you build a team and an infrastructure around the collegiate esports program and really develop a monster program? Hello. Good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to episode 46 of the Esports Narrative. I am your host, Spencer Alessi, and this is a podcast that's all about the exploration of competitive video gaming and the passionate communities that make it so exciting. Tonight's guest is Timothy Fowler. He is at TJFowler89 on Twitter. He's a League of Legends coach. He's an IT guy. He works for the applications operations team at Southern New Hampshire University. A little bit of a bio piece. He previously ran an esports team at his alma mater, Randolph College in Virginia. He's also married, has 2 dogs, 3 cats, and enjoys long walks on the beach. Just kidding. I added that last part. Timothy, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for taking some time out to talk about esports and building a collegiate esports program, which is kind of what I want to talk about tonight. So first, tell me a little bit about your earliest memories playing video games. Like, how did you get into video games as a kid? Did you get in them at all as a kid? Tell us a little bit about your background with that.
So I have a long storied history with video games. I started very young, probably 5 or 6, playing original Super Mario Brothers on the NES with my mother. Just kind of trying, I guess, to play when you're 5 or 6, but I did it. From there, I played the most probably with my neighbor. When I was a young teenager, we got into StarCraft Brood War. We played a lot of custom games, a lot of tower defense stuff, really casual there. Moved into Warcraft 3 from there. And in high school, I played a ton of World of Warcraft, probably an unhealthy amount of World of Warcraft, as most of us do.
I'm right there with you.
Yep. So from there, I got into StarCraft 2 in college really heavily. And started following the pro scene because it was really starting to pick up in college. That was probably around 2011, 2010, something to that effect. And StarCraft 2 obviously was relatively new at the time, and it had just come out. It had a huge professional following, so I was following that. I was watching Day 9. I don't know if you're familiar with Day 9. He did a lot of strategy videos, and I used to watch every single one every night, try to step up my game a little bit. And me and some friends from college all started competing. We all really love the game, so I put together a group there, and we started playing against other colleges. And from there, I built a college gaming club, became the president of the club, and founded it at Randolph College. So it was me and my close friends, and as we moved forward, we brought in other people from the community that were interested, and eventually put up a League of Legends team. So a lot of video games in my in my lifetime.
Awesome. There's one common trend that I'm hearing a lot of my guests say as this video game memories. A lot of it is StarCraft, a lot of Warcraft, which makes sense. You know, Warcraft 2004, StarCraft, similar timeline. It's got a storied history in esports, and I'm assuming, you know, through StarCraft and League of Legends, that's kind of how you got into the esports part of it, right? Like, when did you first hear about esports as like something that people were playing on a professional level to like make money?
It was probably right about that time. I think it was late high school, or right at the start of StarCraft 2 is when I really became interested in it, and I had heard about it previously. I knew that people played professionally, but it wasn't necessarily something that a ton of people watched or really had the opportunity to watch on the internet too much at the time. Um, but I remember right around there, I went to a LAN not too far from my house where I was living with my parents at the time. Um, and it was a StarCraft tournament. And you went in, it was bracketed, it was amazing. So that was kind of my first foray into it. Previously, actually, when I was, I think, late high school, I also played in a Gears of War, not even a LAN, it was just a 1v1 tournament at a local game shop, which was a ton of fun. So that was when I really started to see what competitive was, and then from there I got into the professional StarCraft and really following the scene.
So why do you think esports is so exciting and exploding right now?
I mean, historically, like, games are fun. Games have always been fun, and we all know that.
That's a good simple point.
Yeah, being good at games is even better. Um, so esports has this fan base that's interested not only in the entertainment of watching video games, but for informative purposes. That's really where my focus was. I wanted to get better, and I watched A9 to make myself get better and to learn from somebody who had a history in esports. And we're doing that now with professional teams, watching people who are playing constantly, who are really striving to get better, who have coaches who are helping them get better. And right now, I don't think entertainment's ever been as interactive as it is in esports. We can interact with the teams and players on social media. We can watch the match and literally apply what they are doing directly to what we do immediately after we finish watching it at home. So the level of immersion that we have is gigantic, and the advertisers are seeing the demographic and the immersion, and they're willing to invest in it, which is awesome. And it's been shown in League of Legends. It's been shown in the Overwatch League. So with their investment, we're getting better content. We're able to watch more, we're able to consume more, and we're able to learn more from it. And the players get better support as well, which is something that's been a problem in esports for a while. So I think it's a win-win for everybody, and it's really just kind of coming to a point now where it's exploding.
And likewise with collegiate esports, what do you think is the attraction for the collegiate side of it? Obviously, there's scholarships. Students are able to compete at a high level, for their schools. What do you think is the major attraction points for college esports, and why do you think that has taken off so tremendously in the last, 6 or 12 months?
I don't think that the attraction itself is that much different than professional, really. It's that same desire. It's that same desire to get better and to prove that you are proficient in the game, that you have skill in the game. It helps a lot that collegiate esports has been a grassroots effort. So all of the programs that I've come across in the country, everybody I've talked to, they've all come from either a club or a group of friends at a school who really love a game, who like playing each other in the game, and then wanted to test that against other schools. The same reason that people wanted to do that with chess when the internet first came out. Um, so I think that it's really coming up across the country right now because administrations are seeing not only the passion that the students already have and the fact that they're already participating, but they're also seeing the success of the professional scene. So when a club or an individual goes to the administration at the school and they can say to them, yeah, Robert Kraft just bought an Overwatch team for $20 million. And believe me, Robert Kraft is well known in my area.
Mm-hmm.
They see that. They recognize that.
What do you think?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So just to kind of add on to that a little bit, when you take both of those factors, students are incredibly passionate and professional is so prevalent in our demographic, specifically the demographic that colleges are looking for and looking to recruit, adoption's incredibly easy. When you look at like the startup costs for a college hockey team, for example, and not to knock hockey, I played hockey for like 10 years and love it. Esports isn't a monumental effort for a school to adopt. It doesn't need an ice rink and staff to run the ice rink and coaches and groundskeepers for outside of the ice rink. We need one room, a couple of computers, a coach, and some tech support. And from there, you can build.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that's interesting to me is the numbers of the statistics of college enrollment, right? I'm curious to see what the statistics are currently for college enrollment, or let's say a year ago, what they were, and compare that to now or 5 years from now and see if, college enrollment is going to increase on the backs of these esports programs. I'm curious of what you think about that, but just thinking of it intuitively, if esports, if you can go to school and play Overwatch on the team and get a scholarship for it, it just makes sense that there's going to be more options for you as far as college goes. You might even consider going to college when you were like, well, I don't know, I don't want to get all that debt. I'm curious what you think about the enrollment and how that would play into esports.
The scholarships definitely help when it comes to at least attracting students, because that is a big question right now. Is that amount of debt worth it for me? I think that it is, having a bachelor degree that I am currently in a lot of debt for. I think that the experience, first of all, is worth it, and the knowledge that you gather while you're there is definitely worth it. Now, if you are able to do that, doing something that you love, whether it be soccer or Overwatch, I think that we should be able to provide that. And I do think enrollment numbers will go up. I'm sure that there are people across the country right now who are making decisions on schools based on whether or not they have esports programs.
It's definitely an interesting time, and I'm curious to see like where it goes, and the whole debt thing is really interesting to me. But the crux of what I wanted to dive into on this episode is collegiate esports programs, how to build them, lay some groundwork, some framework ideas to help people who are developing their own, or maybe they're thinking about it. Let's figure that out for them in this episode and talk a little bit more about it. So the first thing I'm thinking of is the goal. What should the goal of a collegiate esports program be?
I think that it's different for different people in the community. So for me, I am, as it stands right now, a volunteer coach. So I'm not getting paid for what I do right now. Hopefully that will change in the future, and I will become the coach for the team officially. Um, but for me, it's really about the student experience. It's about showing the students that what they are doing is impactful and relevant and important. So as you mentioned, I've mentioned, I started that program at Randolph. And when I was there, when I was a student, I started that club, and I started talking to the administration. I talked to professors, I talked to staff, and just told them what we were doing. And I got to say to them, yeah, we beat West Point in StarCraft, and I didn't necessarily know the StarCraft part of it, but beating West Point was big. Um, so they were building a new student center at the time, and they gave our club some money to have some space in that, and they let us build all of the computers and to design the space to some extent. We didn't get to design the building, but so as the club and as the StarCraft team at the time, we built all of the machines for the team. And just having that recognition of them saying, we think what you're doing is important and we think what you're doing is relevant, it was incredibly rewarding. So my goal is to pass that along, to make it so that students can do what they love to do for the school as opposed to in their dorm room. When it comes to schools separately, I hope that that is at base what the schools are interested in, as well as recruiting and retention. So, as you mentioned before, enrollments are what universities and colleges are most interested in. They want to bring students in, they want to show them that the school is a fun place to learn. So, being able to recruit and being able to suggest and show that they have an esports team and that they would rather people develop their skills publicly and really work with a staff to develop those skills, is relevant. And then when it comes to retention as well, students who are happy like to stay at school. I,
Imagine that.
yeah, right. I remember not wanting to turn papers in and not wanting to do anything, but the thought of not being able to play League for the school anymore was terrifying to me. So I did them.
So when you're building that program and when you're thinking about SNHU, how do you determine if there's enough interest at your school to introduce a program or start a team, that kind of thing?
So at Randolph, I was a little bit lucky in that we already had a group that we could build a team from, but what I didn't know was that there were more people interested. So really, at base, ask everybody on campus, ask people you walk by and don't know, post flyers and get permission to post flyers because campuses don't like that very much. You have to have permission to do that. Search for clubs and just talk to people. So at Randolph, I founded the club, obviously, as I mentioned, because we didn't have one, but I had 40 or 45 people that were interested in joining and participating and watching matches, even if they weren't playing. At SNU, I'm a staff member. Obviously, I'm not a student anymore. So I found that there was a gaming club, and I went and talked to them and just said, hey, I have this idea. I'd really like to kind of beef up the program when it comes to esports, and they already had an esports arm of the club. So I've been working with the VP of the esports arm of the club, who is also on the team, to talk about what they need, what their struggles are, and then separately all about actually playing League. So really, it's just ask around, advertise. If it's not there, create it. It's not a gigantic task to really start. And I'd be surprised if any campus in the country at this point didn't have a club already, or they didn't have students that would be interested in joining a club if there was one.
Ask and you shall receive, right?
Right.
So we've got a goal in mind. We know what the college or the university trades on. We've determined that there's interest at our school. How once you find this out, how do you get your school on board with this? How do you pitch the idea to them? How do you sell them on formalizing this program and making it something that in the future could maybe be, scholarship based?
Sure. So I think the first and most important thing, and what I'm trying to do and support, is to do the work first. You can play. Teams don't necessarily need scholarships and coaches and everything to really start. The students, as I mentioned before, we've been doing this for years. I did it 8 years ago now. You can start a team, but when it comes to actually building a varsity program and selling a school on it, I went around to a lot of people on campus. I thought about who might be interested and where I could go from there. So I was first routed actually to the game development and design department, because when you talk to an administration and you say you play video games, they're going to point you to the game department, which is usually a good start because they will know what you're talking about. And they had a lot of insights and they thought about it a lot, but they didn't necessarily have any plans for esports. Their focus is mostly art design, game design, not competition as much. So I took a lot of their input. I took input from athletics and I took input from admissions. So I got, our school has a form that people will fill out when you're thinking about bringing on a new sport. And that includes a budget, it includes the league, it includes a lot of the considerations that an athletics department would look into. So I took that. I talked to admissions and just to see what the level of interest was. So they, our director of admissions actually is a huge Dota 2 fan and a Counter-Strike fan. So he is aware of esports, and students will ask, prospective students coming to SNU will ask if there are esports teams. So there's there's one thing that you can kind of focus on. But for my proposal, I effectively put together a general overview of esports, what it is, what the professional scene looks like, what the collegiate scene looks like, and what it would mean for the school if we actually brought a program in. So I talked about recruitment opportunities. I talked about student experience, student happiness, etc. And then I went to HR and I got job descriptions from the athletics department. So when we hire a new coach, what qualities are we looking for? Taking those same qualities that we look for in traditional sports, adapting it to esports, adding some tech background, adding coaching experience, and came up with job descriptions for what coaches would look like, what tech analysts would look like, etc. And then I put together a budget with all of that information. So I think taking a holistic approach to it. Don't necessarily just say it would be great for students, but say it would be great for students, it would be great for staff, it would be great for the athletics department or whatever department really we put it under, to be able to say, yes, we have that program and you can participate in it.
So it sounds like you kind of did some lobbying too with faculty, right? To get them on board with what you were doing, kind of like the school leaders almost, so to speak. Would you say that's something that you tried to do as well, as get some people on your side to kind of help you and say, this is endorsed by so and so, or this is endorsed by this group?
Definitely, or at least even if it's not endorsed, and even if they are not, you don't want to go through and try to twist somebody's arm and say, hey, do you think you could get behind me on this? But once you talk to them about it and what it is and how it can affect people, I think it really helps. Like talking to somebody in athletics who didn't necessarily know a ton about the video games, there's a lot of overlap there. So I liken tanks to linemen. You know, that's something where you can say this player plays this specific sort of role, and they're basically a lineman, except they're not, a gigantic football player usually.
Right. And you mentioned a lot of interesting things there that I think a lot of people or most people may just skip over, right? You got job descriptions, you put a budget together, a lot of really smart things you did. Another thing I'm thinking of is, should you already have a plan of which games you should compete in? Was that part of your formulation of pitching this? Was like, okay, I think we could have a team in this because there's an interest here. We should play this game, or we should have this game. Was there any kind of discussion about what games you should compete in?
Yes. So I think that you should not only have a plan of which games to compete in, but specifically why you have chosen those games. So in my proposal, I started with League of Legends because it is the game that I know the most, and I think it's the game that translates uh, most effectively to some traditional sports in some senses. And that might be a stretch because I think Overwatch is similar, but show not only what those games are, how many people play on it, for example, but show the support that the developers are giving to esports. So Riot, for example, just signed a deal with the Big Ten Network, and they're giving every school in the 10 network $35,000 for scholarship money for students. So there are partnerships to be had with those developers. So my proposal started with League, as I mentioned, and then over the course of 2 years expanded to other games as well. So Overwatch was one of them. I think Dota 2 was one of them. Hearthstone was one of them. I'm also interested in Magic the Gathering, depending on how their online program does. Rocket League. So I think at base all schools should be considering Overwatch right now, just with the perceived success of the Overwatch League so far. I think that should influence a lot of schools.
Do you think there's any one or multiple esports that are better than the others for a collegiate atmosphere or collegiate kind of perspective?
I don't necessarily know. Like, I prefer team games specifically, at least to start with programs, specifically because it translates from traditional sports pretty easily. And now there are obviously individual sports as well, like tennis, but the amount of staffing generally required for individual games is higher because when you think about Hearthstone, you can talk about strategies and principles, but it's generally one-on-one coaching that you want to be doing with a game like that. And when you have one coach trying to coach maybe one or two games, it's a little bit more difficult. So I'd prefer League of Legends or Overwatch to StarCraft, for example, for a starting program.
So is that why we don't see very much like Smash or Tekken or Marvel vs. Capcom, Marvel, in the collegiate scene?
There's actually a large Smash community in collegiate, but I have not seen too much of it get picked up. And I think that that's actually probably a product of Nintendo not totally supporting esports rather than staffing limitations or anything to that effect.
Yeah. Oh, it's Nintendo, right? I mean,
Sure.
who knows? So, all right. So we've got a goal for our program. We've got interest. We have, maybe some people on board. We're pitching the idea. The school accepts it. The school's on board. They said, yes, go for it. I think it's awesome. We should do it. They give you funding for the program and, you get all the pieces in place. Now what? You're at a point where everyone said yes. Everything looks good. You got green lights, check marks across the board. Now what? What do you do now?
So the number one and most important thing that you need as a team is dedicated space. So getting that dedicated space is always going to be number one. At Randolph, for example, they gave us the money for the computers, but the student center they were building wasn't done. We found an unused conference room on campus. And we said, hey, can we use that spot for now? We set up all the computers and we were in the center of main hall, just in there playing League of Legends. Just start. Number one, start. So if you, for example, are starting up a program and you're not coaching, get a coach. Coaches are going to be one of the most important things to a program because the students need that support. Video games are a lot different than traditional sports because practicing them is not difficult. You can practice every minute of every day if you want to. That can be overkill. We are all still here at the end of the day for an education. So making sure that people are focusing on that and they have the resources they need, whether it be in financial aid or tutoring help, anything to that effect, coaches are going to be really important. But I think securing space and starting to play and getting in the leagues is the most important starting point.
So what are some strategies to help build up that infrastructure, build up the team, build up the support staff around, the esports program?
I think generally just finding people that are interested. I don't think everybody I've heard talk about esports has always been astounded by how willing everybody is to participate and to assist. So finding people with experience is obviously the best, but finding people that are just willing to help is equally as beneficial. One thing that I like to look for both in players, both in athletes and coaches is experience from traditional sports. So a lot of times you will see people who play a ton of video games but have never played on a team before. And that can be kind of a mindset shift when you're joining up. So if somebody is coming in and saying, hey, I do coaching, do they coach on an individual level? Have they just coached clients, for example, or have they coached teams specifically? So finding the right people, and then broadcast. I find personally, while I am coaching, that it's incredibly difficult to help the team in the pick and ban phase and stream or commentate or anything of the sort. So finding people dedicated to that is going to be important. And then tech support. Now that could be from the IT department at your university. If your coaches are proficient in tech and have the permissions to actually make changes, they could do it as well. But Yeah, just finding people with experience and people who are really excited and willing to help.
How should you determine which leagues you can participate in? Now, you mentioned briefly ago about Riot partnering with Big Ten, which is awesome. But aside from that, some developers are kind of tightening their reins a little bit with what you can do with their game and with their platform. So, how do you determine which leagues you should and can participate in?
I think this is probably the most subjective question when you're building a program, but when it comes to Blizzard games, for the most part, you're going to be participating in TESPA, if not the Collegiate Star League. We have chosen, the team actually separately from me, I put it up to them, chose to join Collegiate League of Legends. So Riot is sponsoring the Collegiate League this year as partners with Battlefy, and they've split from the Collegiate Star League. And Collegiate Star League is doing a JV league effectively. So I put it up to the team and said, which ones do you guys want to participate in? And they said the Riot-sponsored College League of Legends, which I think is good because it's considered the varsity program and will be more of a challenge for them, which I'm looking forward to. But it's really up to the program, what the program thinks is most effective. AVGL, for example, tends to do more tournaments than they do leagues, I've noticed. And then there's the NACE, which you need to effectively be a varsity program for. You need staff. You need a couple of other things that I can't think of right now. My apologies.
No worries.
So yeah, I think it's up to the program, but there is a ton of support in all different venues.
So, what do you think about prize money? How do they structure it? Are students walking away with prize money for their winnings in these leagues and these tournaments? How does that work? And give us a little bit of a picture, if you can, of what that looks like for the students and for the university.
Sure. So the one that we're actively participating in is College League of Legends, as I mentioned. So I'm going to speak to that one because I've been researching that one the most and I'm most familiar with it. They do, I think it's 8,000 per player to the first place team, and that is exclusively scholarship money for educational expenses. And they alternately also have a scholarship for staff involved, which I think is really, it shows a lot that they're trying to support supporting teams. And I'm hoping if we do make it to that section of the tournament, I think it's the top 8 get scholarship money, that if I were to get any staff scholarship, I would donate it and start a fund at SNU for the esports program.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like the emphasis on supporting the school, and I'm sure there have been counter arguments to just a straight out prize money to students. I'm curious on what your perspective of that is. It's like, should these students be allowed to just make straight prize money from these tournaments and things like that?
As it stands right now, when it comes to actually participating in tournaments separately from collegiate, there's no restrictions as far as I'm aware. I'll look into that now. But I personally would like to see it stay to scholarship money. I think that it rewards people who are focusing on academics first and kind of removes the grab for money aspect of it. That they're going to a university, they're saying, I want to be here to get an education, and while I'm here, I'm going to play League of Legends, or I'm going to play Overwatch. And if I do well in that and we succeed, my education will be paid for because of it. So the resources that have been given to me from the school that I attend, I'm going to be able to use those to kind of pay off my time there and get an education out of it to boot.
Does the university get anything from these leagues? Like, say your team goes on, wins the championship for this league. Does the university get any prize money for that win?
I don't believe that they get any prize money. From what I can tell and from what I've seen kind of around the country with different different programs. It's more of a marketing venture for them than anything. So
Hmm.
Columbia College, for example, they've done incredibly well in League of Legends. They're a very strong team, and I wouldn't know about Columbia College otherwise. Um, so I don't believe that schools are getting money directly from developers or from tournaments, but they're getting notoriety. They're getting their name out. People want to go play for those schools.
So if you could change one thing about esports, what would it be?
Oh, that is a really great question.
Or maybe collegiate esports, from, to make it more specific to your background.
Sure. I would like to see just generally the production value of tournaments go up. I'd like to see the competition level of tournaments go up. And we are kind of a fledgling program right now, so we might not necessarily be the most competitive, but we are putting in the time and the effort to get there. So I think as schools start to pick up programs and we start to get staff around teams, we'll start to see that production value go up. And I think it's on a lot of the programs to really take it, to treat it as competitively as possible, as opposed to, hey, esports is the new thing, let's start doing that, and not necessarily putting in the work or the effort necessary.
What's your biggest pet peeve, let's say, in esports? Like, as far as the industry goes, or something that just really grinds your gears that you just wish wouldn't be the way it is. You mentioned the production value, wish it was better, but what's like a pet peeve, something that really gets under your skin about the esports ecosystem?
I can't say the ecosystem necessarily is part of this, but watching the Overwatch League, I just want more third person. I just want to watch Genji ults in third person. So that's been my most recent pet peeve anyway. But I think as a whole, it's the stigma generally that students and players get. They're just playing video games, you know? When you
Mhm.
watch somebody who has gone from bronze to diamond, for example, in League or in StarCraft, they've put in a ton of work and they have learned a lot and they have dedicated themselves to developing their strategy. And when schools recognize that they are doing that, that they're putting in that practice and that they are getting better, they're recognizing that they're getting better as people overall, not just as gamers.
What do you think the esports industry needs to continue to grow, grow in scholarship numbers, grow in programs at colleges, just grow in exposure and media production? Like, overall, what do you think the esports industry needs to continue to grow and be the exciting, dominant, force for 2018 and beyond?
I think Overwatch League has been doing this pretty well recently, and I think it's a focus on the people that play, that commentate, that contribute. The narratives, Spencer, but really showing that
Funny that you say that.
right, really showing that people are dedicating themselves to this and they have a story and they have a personality. And despite everybody playing esports, generally controlling an avatar or a character on a screen, that they are people that are proving themselves effectively, that are learning constantly, and that reflects like their success in games and their success around the esports world is a reflection of them.
Yeah, awesome. Lastly, where can people connect with you? Where should people be watching out for? I heard you say snoo. Is that how you say it? And
Yeah, yeah. So SNHU, but it is generally pronounced snoo by everybody.
nice. So yeah, shout outs or where people can connect with you or the college or the university. And the floor is yours. Tell people what to pay attention to.
Um, as you mentioned at the start, TJ Fowler 89 on Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me there if you have any questions or any thoughts. I want to give a quick shout out to the team. They've been putting in a lot of hard work this year, and we go up against NYU on Saturday night. So looking forward to that as well. When it comes to SNU Esports, reach out to me on Twitter if you have any thoughts or interests. That's probably the best way for me to bring anything to the university.
Awesome. Well, Tim, just want to thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate you talking about collegiate esports and developing a program. I think this will be super valuable for people who are looking to do this or have already begun the process. So I appreciate your experience and your insight on it. And I appreciate you taking some time for us tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Spencer. Appreciate your time.
And with that, I just want to remind everyone that if this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning. Hey guys, real quick before you go, I just want to say thanks for listening and supporting the show. It really means a lot to me that you like it, and I hope that if you found some value from this podcast, that you'll share it on Twitter or on Instagram or Facebook, anywhere that you have a social media presence. I would love it if you would just share it with 3 to 4 people that might be interested in it. It would absolutely mean the world to me. It would help me get my name out there, help me get the podcast out there. I do this solely for the love of esports and for the love of getting to know people and hearing the stories of esports that I think are so awesome. So please, if you got value from this, if you enjoyed it, please share it with someone who you think might like it. And with that, I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.